Hey, what's up, guys? So, no editing, so that's cool. We're just going straight through a straight form. Today I'm talking about three teams that actually were winners in the NFL draft and three teams that were actually losers. Now, I do have one honorable mention for the teams that were losers, but I feel like the draft overall, I wasn't really going to even do a video like this because the draft overall, a lot of teams really did just kind of play it safe. Like, they didn't do a whole lot of this, they didn't do a whole lot of that. They just kind of like, yeah, we kind of need that. Yeah, that guy's pretty good. Like, there were no guys who we felt like they had a chance that was taken on them. There was no guys that fell too far. There was one guy that kind of looked like he got picked too quickly. But other than, like, a couple of isolated incidents, for the most part, and I was watching the draft, it didn't really seem like anything was a surprise. You know, I was like, okay, that makes sense. That pick makes sense. So it was a little bit more challenging, but we are also going to go with three winners and three losers. Starting with, I like to be positive, so we'll start off with the winners, and we'll go, this is obviously going in order, and this is like hard for me to say, but I am going to say it. I do think it holds true. The first of the three winners is the Detroit Lions. Right? I mean, okay, so you look at the second round pick as kind of like you love it or hate it because you have Kerryon Johnson, obviously, but the thing that the Lions have been with like the last like five of their running backs, dating back to like Kevin Jones, Amir Abdullah, that's right. What's that guy's name? Anyway, and then Havad Best. And then there was like one other in that situation. Reggie Bush was a running back for a while. And then now Kerryon Johnson, they've all had a very similar sort of persona. They can run for 1,000 yards in a season, but then all of a sudden, they're injured all the time, right? And so the thing that the Lions have almost always done is they haven't been proactive, they've been reactive. And the Lions, if my memory serves me right, I'm 24 years old, since Barry Sanders, they haven't ran a two-back system. They haven't successfully ran a two-back system. So the fact that they did that, they used the second-round pick on DeAndre Swift from Georgia to get that running back position. I like that they used the first of the third-round picks to get an edge rusher, and then the second of the third-round picks to get a guard. That was a huge need that I thought they needed, was defensive line and edge rusher. And then they refilled the corner position. And at the end of the day, the main thing that was wrong with Darius Slay in Detroit was that he wanted more money than he was probably worth. That was honestly probably the main thing that was wrong with it. So now instead, the Lions are able to get someone who's probably just as good, if not better. I mean, Jeff Okudua, that's not right. He went to Ohio State, so it doesn't matter. He's very good. He was a very accomplished cornerback out of Ohio State. And also he's like 6'1", right? And so for a cornerback to be 6'1", that's actually like a huge height advantage that he's going to have. A lot of times at cornerbacks, I think Richard Sherman's like 5'10", 5'9", if that's right. Like a lot of times, you could go, the list goes on and on. In most cases, corners aren't very tall. They're not very big because they don't have to be. But the fact that he is, that's going to help the Detroit Lions. Obviously, I would like to see him on the other side of the ball of Darius Slay, but that's not super imperative. So overall, like I said, the Lions had a safer draft pick than usual, but they all made sense. So that's something I really, really liked. And then for the three losers, first team I want to talk about is going to be the Houston Texans. Now, the Houston Texans didn't have a lot of draft picks because of different trades that had going on. So I really was confused when it came to Houston. I looked at it. I saw again, obviously, like I said, I followed the draft, day one and day two. I didn't really follow it super hard day three. But I really was confused as to why they didn't pick a receiver. Like, I know they just got, what was that dude's name? Oh my goodness, I forgot the guy. They just picked up another guy who was supposed to, Brandon Cooks. Yeah, Cooks. They just got Cooks from Los Angeles, and they still have David Johnson, and all those things are cool, but it's like, but what are you doing? Like, you don't seem to be moving in the right direction as far as trying to make up for the fact that you traded away DeAndre Hopkins, and I understand D-line was a huge issue for the Houston Texans last year because they couldn't stay healthy. And offensive tackle was huge because they ended up getting rid of an offensive tackle over the offseason, and so they had to fill that spot to protect Deshaun Watson. But at the end of the day, the draft, and this is something Colin Cowherd was actually talking about, the draft sends a message to the entire world, to the at least the rest of the NFL and the the United States, like, and the NFL fans, I should say, not the United States. We'll just say it's the United States and the entire world. This is what we think of our team, right? So if you draft a receiver, even though it's the second round, the 40th overall pick, it's a very deep receiver draft. So if you draft a receiver, even if he's not nearly as good as, obviously Brandon Cooks, or maybe he doesn't even start, you still send the message like, hey, we know that Deshaun Watson's upset about losing DeAndre Hopkins, but we're trying to do something to mitigate that. And I understand that winning cures everything, and they should, try to find a way to fix their need instead. But they're going to lose their quarterback if they don't get him someone to throw to. And right now, he doesn't have anyone good to throw to. And that's a very dangerous game that the Houston Texans are playing. Not really assessing. I mean, yeah, like I said, they got Brandon Cooks in the offseason, but they're not really assessing their need at receiver all super duper well. The next team I want to talk about, this team actually kind of surprised me, was the Indianapolis Colts. So the Indianapolis Colts also didn't have a first-round draft pick, right? But they did take a wide receiver and a running back. I really like Jonathan Taylor. I mean, they had 2 second-round picks, but I really like Jonathan Taylor out of the second round. And they took a safety, and then they took a quarterback. That was probably my favorite. That, just like looking at who they took, they took care of somewhat of a necessity on defense. Their defensive secondary wasn't horrible, wasn't great. Obviously, it was right there in the middle. And then they handled a receiver spot. They don't necessarily need a receiver, obviously. They still have one, but it was a deep wide receiver draft. So they took advantage of it, and they just got a brand new toy in Phillip Rivers. So he can now utilize that. He can utilize now Jonathan Taylor. This team looked like a team that, yes, we're not necessarily going to, we don't look like we might win the Super Bowl this year, but why not them? Houston took a step back. Tennessee was great in the postseason, but that might have been due to matchups. That might have been due to a couple of things. There's, are they going to be able to duplicate what they did last year? I'm not entirely sure if that's going to be the case. And then Jacksonville shouldn't even be, they should be in the XFL, to be honest with you. So the Indianapolis Colts have a definite position to win their division, and they did a draft that, like I said, a lot of teams had the draft that was safe, not anything too crazy, not anything too horrible, and they did a very good job of what they were able to do. Now, they drafted Jacob Eason, like I said, quarterback. He can learn behind Phillip Rivers. I think they still have Jacoby Brissett, so he can learn behind Phillip Rivers as well. But you can never have too many backup quarterbacks. You can have too many starting quarterbacks. You can never have too many backup quarterbacks. The next team I want to talk about, and the last two teams, like I said, we're going to have an honorable mention from the losers as well. But the last two teams have something somewhat similar. It's like the opposite, but similar why they're losers. But anyway, I'm talking about the Pittsburgh Steelers, okay? So, once again, didn't have a first-round draft pick. I did like the pick of the receiver. He's a solid player out of Notre Dame. That was pretty cool. Chase Claypool. That's cool. I like the edge rush, sort of. They were decent on defense as well. They weren't, terrible. What they needed was obvious, I felt like, and they just didn't go for it. And it wasn't necessarily speaking a not deep draft for that position. They just didn't go for it, right? They needed... Okay, let's talk about the three teams for a second. The San Diego Chargers at the time, now the Los Angeles Chargers, and then we talk about the New York Giants, and then we talk about the Pittsburgh Steelers. They all drafted a quarterback. They were all very, very good at that time, and they drafted them, and all of a sudden they turned into a very prominent playoff team, right? And so the Giants already have their backup. The Chargers have actually just moved on. Eli Manning's retired. Ben Roethlisberger is still playing. Why does he not have a reliable backup? They don't seem like they knew that was a necessity that they probably needed. They probably should draft a backup quarterback, because if I'm being real, the Steelers would have made the playoffs. The Titans wouldn't have made that big run had the Steelers had a legitimate backup quarterback. And so, honestly, for that reason alone, similar to the number one thing, the quarterback position, because it is so important, that's why they're one of the losers. And the number one winner, in my opinion, of the NFL draft, and like I said, this is just my opinion, you can comment your opinion down below, was the Miami Dolphins. They just killed it. They absolutely killed it, because the Dolphins... One, they're a franchise that consistently has not gone out on a limb on quarterbacks and on certain things. 2, they are not in the best position right now to win. Yes, they have a lot of cool young pieces, but a lot of teams have a lot of cool young pieces. That doesn't make them a good NFL team, right? But they drafted an offensive tackle to protect their quarterback. They drafted a cornerback to fill that need on the other side of the ball. But then they drafted another guard, and then another guard, and then a receiver at the tail end of the draft, which is pretty cool. They filled up some needs on defense, and then they drafted Tua Tagovailoa. I've heard his name so many times. Tua Tagovailoa? Oh, the Lavoya. No, that's not right either. But it doesn't matter. They took the chance on the quarterback. This is like I was just talking about with the Steelers pick, man. You have to put a bunch of prominence on that position, on the quarterback position. Now, would I think he probably made more sense on a different team that can wait a year for him to get fully healthy and to learn a thing or two? Yes, I was saying this during my live casting of the NFL draft. Quarterbacks do better when they sit behind. I think Ben Roethlisberger started right away, so that's not a good example, and so did Peyton Manning. But I think so did Drew Brees too. I'm just gonna name people who go against my point. Aaron Rodgers, Tom Brady, these quarterbacks, they sat behind. A lot of the great Patrick Mahomes, Lamar Jackson, they sat behind their players for a year or two, and then they jumped in. I think that would have been the best for Tua, but I really, really liked what the Miami Dolphins did. It wasn't spectacular. No one did spectacular. No one was like, wow, they're getting steals left and right. But the Dolphins did do a very good job. And I think they're the number one winner of the NFL draft. So honorable mention before we get to the ultimate loser is the New England Patriots. Strictly because I feel like the Patriots I don't know what they're doing. Like, I know, okay, I get it. They filled out a really good, they solved their issue of, tight end and place kicker. They drafted a kicker. I didn't even know that. They might even be the third biggest lose. They drafted a kicker. Why did they draft a kicker? Anyway, they drafted safety, but it just felt like, you know how when if you play basketball, there's always that one guy who double clutches when no one's even guarding him on a layup, and then he just overshoots the rim, doesn't even touch rim on a layup, and you're like, bro, what are you doing? You're doing too much. That's kind of what the Patriots felt like. They were like trying to Patriots their way into the draft, and it was just like, bro, what are you doing? Just draft players and fill up need. That is your quarterback. Like, there's no team that needs a quarterback probably more than the Patriots. There's teams that need a quarterback as much as the Patriots, but there's no team that needed a quarterback as much as the Patriots. And, maybe they picked one up here or they did one up here. Why would you not just take him in the draft? You had a selection. You had a pick in the NFL draft. I don't know. That was an honorable mention. The number one overall loser, though, is definitely going to have to go to the Green Bay Packers. This was a meme, actually, I saw on Facebook, so I shouldn't 100% take credit for what I'm about to say. But the Packers' best two position players on offense was quarterback and running back. And then their first two selections in the NFL draft, and they weren't superstars at their position either, was quarterback and running back. Why in the world did the Packers trade up to get Jordan Love from Utah State? And then why in the world did the Packers, who had honestly a top 5 running back last year, just look at the stats, in Aaron Jones, draft a running back in the second round? Like, what are you doing? They drafted a tight end. That's cool. I think they already had Jimmy Graham. Is that the team Jimmy Graham's on? No, he's on the Bears now, right? I don't know. They never drafted a receiver. They drafted a bunch of players for the defensive side of the football. It's like, your defense was fine. Your defense was the reason why you went 13-3. To be honest, your defense and your running game was why you went 13-3. And I know you're trying to duplicate that, but it's just like, maybe the Packers know something about Aaron Rodgers that I don't. Because I don't necessarily think Aaron Rodgers is an all-time great quarterback, but he's definitely good, like one of the best right now. And you're just like wasting the opportunity for him to become the GOAT, like the greatest of all time, while he's a Green Bay Packer. It didn't make any sense at all. So let me do a review real quick if I can remember. 3 winners, 3 losers. 3 winners being the Detroit Lions, Indianapolis Colts, Miami Dolphins. They definitely seemed like they were franchises that knew what they were doing. And then you have, of course, the losers, which was the Pittsburgh Steelers, which was the Green Bay Packers and the New England Patriots. I forgot the third team that I mentioned as well, but that's okay. That's it for the video. We got to 15 minutes on the dot. That's my reaction. What team do you think had the best NFL draft? Which team do you think had the worst one? Let me know in the comments down below. Smash that like button on the way down. And, of course, subscribe for even more sports content. But most of all, have a great day.